Okay, welcome back. This is another one of those presentations where we're going to work on the fundamentals and the foundations of Bash and Linux. We're going to be going over expansions, substitutions, and commands. So we're going to start with the PowerPoint like we usually do, and it just gives you an opportunity to see and view what something is without me just telling you. Some of you people out there are very visual, like I am, and it gives you an opportunity to learn it. Other people are very much auditory and they can learn just from someone talking. And then other reviews need to physically do it, which has its place as well. So as we're talking about that, let's go ahead and get into it. Here we go. Expansion. So expansions take an argument, reads from it, and replaces that value, whatever we called it, that variable, and then we put that value in typically a string. So example here is at the home directory, produce home directory bash, match any file type. This is an expansion. So basically it takes anything that has a symbol to it and it represents something else. Like I said before, you can do this in a string with a variable, but these are built-in expansions with bash. So something like tilde would be the same thing. That's still an expansion. So let's move on from there. Common expansions, list directory, list, all files and directories, tilde, like I was talking about before, home, question mark, and then last directory, which was tilde dash. Okay, I don't use that often, but you might need it for one of your larger scripts. Brace expansion, so your curly braces. Okay, we talked about this in the last one a little bit. This is how you make something sequential, essentially. Anytime you need to make something sequential, you're going to be using this brace expansion. We're going to be doing this occasionally throughout the course, but it's something that you need to know, because if you have to do something 10,000 times, you're not going to want to do that 10,000 times, even if it's in a loop, because this is a little bit easier and it's definitely easier to read. So a single line function is a lot better than a relatively large loop. So here's something to remember and keep in the back of your mind if you ever needed it. Okay. Expansion intervals. Okay. So 10 or 1 through 10, and then we're going to do it for every odd number or every even number. Okay. Does that make sense? We're talking about this right here. So 1 through 10, every second number. So starting at 1, 1 plus 2 equals 3, plus 2 equals 5, plus 2 equals 7. Okay. So if you wanted even numbers here, you'd have to start at either 0 or 2. Okay, so this is a inclusive statement. So think of braces like loops. Okay, yeah, it should be obvious at this point. If you want to nest braces here, this is how you would do it. So you can have 1 through 3, like this, and then you can have A to B. So you'd have 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, and then 3A, 3B. Okay, hopefully that made sense. Again, these tools are there for like when you really need it, and it's going to jump out at you when you really need it. I haven't used it a whole lot, but there's been a couple of times where, yeah, I really needed it. So parameter expansion, this is what we were talking about before with just expansions. So inside of our string here, we can do an echo parameter expansion for var1 equals hello world. We can put this inside of a string and it's still going to work. All right. Okay, mathematical expansions. Okay, double curly brace like we were talking about before. Okay, so one thing I really want to point out here is that if we did 4 divided by 5, that's going to give us a fractional value. That's going to come back as a result of 0 and not the result of anything else, because it doesn't support integers, so it's rounding to the closest integer. Or it doesn't support fractional values or floating point, so it's going to round to the closest integer, which happens to be 0. All right. Bash can only do integers. Yeah, Python, use Python if you need floats. Or if you're getting into that point, you should be using a object-oriented programming language anyways, or C. I guess you could use C as well, but Python and C++ are going to be your friend when you start getting into scenarios like that. Okay. Commands, we went over this a little bit last time. We used the list a lot, we used change directory a lot, we used make directory, and then we used touch as well. We used cat too. So with that said, there's a handful of commands that you're going to use a lot that you're going to end up memorizing regardless. But there's shortcuts with interacting with the system. So one that we didn't use, and is a obvious shortcut that saves you a lot of work, is make user. Create a new user. There's a little bit of work that would go into that, and you don't have to really know what it's doing. You just go user add, here's a username, here we go, and then after that you can set the password if you need to. And then move on from there. We'll be covering that later in the course, but that's a good example of a true shortcut interacting with the system. Okay, common commands. A good chunk of these we've already used, all right? You're going to use them a lot. Anytime that you start talking about, hey, we're going to focus on doing something without setting up the foundation first, you're going to run into that problem where you need a command before you've actually covered it. So we've covered a bunch of these already. So ls we've covered, touch we covered, change mod we covered, change directory we covered, echo we covered, make directory we covered, grep we have not covered. We'll get to that with regular expressions. Print working directory we haven't covered, move directory we haven't covered, remove we haven't covered, kill or sleep we haven't covered. That last little bit there, you're going to use a lot less, but more than something else like AWK. Okay. Switches and options. So a lot of our commands have options built into them if you needed them. So list is an easy example. If you wanted more detailed, you do list dash all for A, all. Okay, the same thing with the remove. If you want a recursive option in terms of, hey, I'm going to remove this folder and then I want to remove everything else inside of that folder, you need to give it the recursive option. So that would be a -R. All right, so there's going to be options built into the commands. We'll cover them as we need them. Just understand that commands typically have options associated with them, and as we move on through this course, you're going to be making your own commands and then understanding what the switches actually are, how to set them, how to take them, how to check for it, how to set parameters directly from the terminal. So we'll get to that eventually, and hopefully you'll understand it more once we get there. But for the time being, just understand that a lot of commands have switches to them. Command substitution. Again, this is what I was referring to earlier. This kernel is uname -R, and then the result is going to be this string right here. So that's a command substitution. Still an expansion, right? We're replacing uname -R with a natural value. Still an expansion. Okay. Same thing with this message from Python, and then this is the biggest value that you could possibly have if you needed this for a command substitution. You can use something like a Python to do something in Bash if you wanted to. The opposite is also true. If you're using Python, you can use a subcommand to get a Bash option if you needed it. All right, so we'll cover that later on in the course, and especially when we do our web app, we're going to need it. We're going to need it quite a bit, actually. So that's the end of the slideshow. Let's go back to our VM, which is right here. Let's log back in. If you're following along, this is everything that we did from last time. So let's go ahead and clear this. It's another command, but this is going to empty out our terminal, like so. And then I'm going to come up here and change our power option. Settings. Because I do not want our screen turning off as we go. So instead of 5 minutes, let's go to never. Sounds like a good idea. There we go. Okay, so just a reorientation, we are still in our home directory in the scripts folder. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and use a couple of those. I'm going to need this as a reference to see what we need to cover. Let's go ahead and start with, we've already done, so if we did this, oh, come on, here we go. If we did this, if I just entered tilde, it's going to check to see if it's a directory. Now, if I do echo tilde, it's going to tell me what that path actually is. So this is really helpful if you needed to know what the full path is of something. So if we did like the last working directory like this, if I didn't know where I was, or I just needed it and I forgot like the spelling of something, I can do that as well. So let's go ahead and change the directory so we get a different value out of this. Let's go back to root. Okay, so if I echo that last working directory, even though I'm in root right now, I was in scripts. Okay, so that should make sense because that's where we just came from. Okay, so this is an example of expansion. So let's move on. So let's do our brace expansion here. So let's go ahead and echo brace expand, and then we are going to need one of these, 1.4. This should give us 4 of these. Oh, it just echoed it. That's not what I wanted. Bad substitution. Okay, let's try making a directory here. We are in our own folder. So I'm only going to do 2 here because I don't want to, actually I'll just make a test folder. So make directory, test folder, permission denied, of course. Here we go, sudo test folder. There we go, let's change to test folder. Like so. We don't have anything in here. I am going to make directory, and then I am going to try this expansion here. So make directory, let's do touch. So touch, test file. We're going to do an expansion here, 1.4.txt, permission denied. So this is working at this point, sudo. Okay, and now I'm going to list, and we just made 4 test files that are text files. Okay, so this is a good way of doing expansion. If you needed it, you can obviously do this in a dedicated script file. And now, because I put this in a folder, I can actually get rid of that folder. So I'm back up here. Okay, so I put this in the root directory, so I really need to get rid of this because that is bad practice. So what we're going to do is remove -R for recursive, test folder. And I'm going to run this as sudo so I can actually get rid of it and have the permissions. So I'm going to list this again, and notice that test folder and all of its children are gone. So that is brace expansion. So let's go ahead and do intervals now. So let's go to our home directory. Now we can make a directory without having much of a problem. Make a directory, test folder. There we go. CD test folder. list just to show you that there's nothing in here. Okay, so we're going to do touch, and then we're going to do test file, and then we're going to do our double expansion or nested expansion. So we're going to do 1.3, and then we're going to do a.b. Okay, so we're going to do this. That should have worked, so I'm going to list this again, and notice, oh, I didn't put a .txt, that's fine. Test file 1a, test file 1b, test file 2a, test file 2b. Okay, so this is how you would get a bunch of files that are similar. So if you're doing file backups and you had a timestamp, and this is one version of that, or how about this? You would have a backup and you would have the name of that server. And then you need to make sure that it increments every time. So this is one way of doing that. I would do it through programmatically instead of doing it like this. But this is an option as well if you wanted to do it like this. I'm going to get rid of this folder again. Remove test folder list. It's not there anymore. Okay. What else do we need to cover in here? Okay, we can cover parameter expansion. So this is our parameter expansion. We're going to go ahead and do an echo hello. Actually, let's make a file real quick. So script. That doesn't look right. There we go. Okay, so we got hello world here. We're going to make a new one. Let's call this param expansion.sh. And we're going to open this up. Actually, I'm going to open this up in code just to show you that one, that we can, and that two, if you really needed to do a relatively large project, code is a better choice just because it's a little bit easier. So we're going to do that. Code par expansion.sh. Okay. And then there is our visual code. We're going to choose dark mode because we should. So here we go. Here is our bin bash. Let's go ahead and change our preferences. Font. Font size. Okay. Instead of 14, let's go up to 20 so you guys can see it. Okay, that looks better. Okay, parameter expansion. Let's add a comment here to just say what this is. Parameter expansion example. All right, so there is that. We're going to do another hello world. However, I'm going to set my name for a variable because we haven't done that yet. So first, name equals Justin. Actually, we'll do last name too. Why not? Last name Briggs, and then we're going to echo a string hello. Get rid of that. There's our parameter expansion. Then we're going to do first name, last name, Control S here to save it, just like a normal file. So one thing that I'm not sure I actually did or not was to make this executable. So I'm going to ls. This is in white, so I know that I did not make this executable. So I'm going to go ahead and change mod, or chmod, plus x for executable, par script. I'm going to list again. It is green now. I can run this script. So /, this is / is saying in this directory, I want you to run this. and it comes back as hello Justin Briggs. So we just did a parameter expansion there where we took a variable and put it into a string. In other languages, JavaScript, Python, things like that, this is called templating or a template string, but for this is called parameter expansion. Okay, let's move on. Let's see what else we got to cover. Math. Okay, so we can do math real quick. Okay, 2 plus 2. I do believe I need my spaces here. 4, command not found. Okay. Okay, let's try doing an echo here. There it is. So that was my mistake. So we echoed this result. It came back as 4. If I come back up here and then I do a divide and then I do this as 4, so this is going to give us half, right? 0.5. It's going to come back as 0 because it rounded up to, or in this case it rounded down to the nearest integer. So now that I'm thinking about it, let's go ahead and do 2/3 and see what it rounds to. It's 0. Okay, so it rounds down regardless. So there's that. We went over a bunch of commands, switches, we've already done that. So that is going to wrap it up for this one. We covered everything that was in the PowerPoint. Yeah, so we got our foundation down. If you're a little lost and a little overwhelmed, that is okay. We're going to be practicing quite a bit up to this point, so you're not going to have to worry about it too much. But as we progress on, these are going to get progressively harder. So with that said, that's going to do it for this one, and I'll see you in the next video.